At GCSAP, we measure just about everything that we can, and we use the Healthy Kids Colorado survey for a lot of basing our efforts off of. You may have heard me about this assessment talking about its validity in the past. When I first came into GCSAP, I've been director since the end of last November, so I'm almost up to 1 year anniversary. And when I first came into GCSAP, I was a little skeptical of this, because when I started talking to the kids, they were telling me that, oh yeah, all the other kids, they're making this stuff up. I know kids that lie on this thing. And so I started doing some research. It turns out that these are the same students that in 2012 perceived their peers to be using a lot more alcohol than they were. And this is just one graph. This is from 2012. This is the entire county put together. On the left-hand side here, we have this blue bar. This is the students' self-reported alcohol use. So the question is, how many times in the last 30 days have you used alcohol? And what this is showing is that 20% of the 6th through 12th grade students in our county report using alcohol at least one or more times in the past 30 days. And then the red bar in here is the perceived use of their peers. So while 20% actually report using, they're perceiving more than 50% to actually be using. And then as we go grade by grade, it's pretty typical. The older kids get, the more alcohol that they choose to use. And this perception still remains. So when this perception is in this 30% range, in the prevention world, we identify that as one risk factor. If we think everybody else is doing it, that could be one piece to peer pressure. And so I'm going to go through each school site. We're going to go Crested Butte, and then Gunnison High School, Gunnison Middle School. And I'm going to still look at perceptions. When I talk to parents and students on either end of the valley, there's this perception that one end or the other is very different from ours. The kids in Crested Butte smoke more pot or drink more. The kids in Gunnison drink more. And there's this perception among either end of the valley, and yet what I think you'll see is that there's a lot more similarities than anything. And at least that's what our data shows. So as we go into Crested Butte, this is 6th through 12th grade. Again, as the kids get older, there's more use, just over 20% for the entire school, which is pretty normal. Look at the disparity in 8th grade. This is 8th grade. 15% of the students are actually reporting using alcohol one or more times, 15%. And yet the perception is that 75% of the students in 8th grade are using alcohol. It's amazing. This 60%, that's a risk factor for sure. As we look into the high school, just under 40% for 9th, 10th, 12th grade, a little blip in 11th grade. As we go into Gunnison High School, it's a little bit fatter because there's only 4 grades presented. Just under 40% for 10th and 12th. 9th grade's a little lower in Gunnison, a little blip in 11th grade, and we still have this 30-40% disparity. As we go into the Gunnison Middle School, we don't see quite the disparity in the 8th grade as we did in Crested Butte. But very similar. The reported use rates are very low. There's still some disparity. So when I looked at this and I started talking to the kids and I called up Omni, who's our evaluator, and I started really digging into the validity of this thing, I learned that there's really smart people putting this kind of stuff together. And in fact, when I started talking to the kids and I asked them, what's going on with this thing? Their original answer is everybody's making it up, they're lying. And I go, well, what about you? Did you honestly answer this thing? 99.9%, there's one kid that busted this 100% who actually admitted to lying. Everyone else has said, yeah, I don't care about it. I just do it. That's perfect. I don't need the kids to care about this thing. In fact, if they're going to lie on this, they've got to care. It takes them about 45, 50 minutes to take this thing. It's pretty big. We gather a lot of data on this assessment. And so it's pretty smartly done. If somebody's going to lie on this thing, they've got to be darn consistent throughout the entire assessment, because there's some questions that are correlated with each other. If a lie or an outlier is really caught, then they're going to be tossing that. Does that make sense? In the end, I think this assessment is a valid tool, and it's just one tool. So I take this data, I bring it out into the community, talk with teachers, our coalition, and students, and really test the actual numbers of this. We administer it every fall. So we've got data since 2006 that we're going to look at in just a moment. And it's only when we put it year by year do we actually see some trends. If it's just 1 year snapshot, it's a day in the life of a student. If we were to give this assessment at the end of spring break, it would be wildly different. But we try to give it in October and November every year. Okay?